Welcome to the meeting of the subcommittee on the ADU pilot, the subcommittee of the Affordable Housing Trust. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and Governor's July 16th, 2022 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of the public body. This meeting of the Great Barrington Affordable Housing Trust ADU Subcommittee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.townofgb.org. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so via the Zoom link at the top of the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. So I think that takes care of that.
Okay.
So shall we get started?
Mm-hmm.
Are folks able to follow along in the worksheet I sent out? The worksheet mirrors the agenda. So if we follow that, we will be within the agenda.
Yeah.
All right. Then for a process, what I propose to manage the committee members and bring Amy's voice in is that we, for each area that we kind of walk through any comments, concerns, items for discussion among the committee members, then invite Amy for input, and then we have the discussion, hopefully resolve the item and move on to the next. Does that sound okay to people?
Yeah.
Great. So the first part of the proposal for us to review and workshop is from the concept stage is the applicant criteria. So that's the criteria by which the homeowner or landlord the applications will what criteria for an applicant. So in our task for today, as I see it, is to see if we can finalize and recommend what those criteria are, and move on. We may, I'm expecting that there will be probably one more detailed level pass at this, but this is the opportunity for us to get enough detail that we feel like we have a solid shape for the idea. So let me open it to committee members.
Well, I have something right off the bat, which is, are we going to be including the tiny house on wheels as an ADU in this whole proposal?
I think it's not an issue because tiny houses are ADUs.
Okay.
So they're just like the way that the code reads, it just says like a tiny house, as long as you hide the wheels, you have to hide the wheels, then it's an ADU.
You have to hide the wheels and hook it up to services.
Yeah, it has to be hooked up, but then it's good.
Okay.
Other question, comments, issues for discussion in this area from committee members? Jeremy?
With the qualifications for the applicants, so there was one of the things was they have to show that they can finance it 100%, but then also they need to show that, what was it? Costs. They need to show that it would assist the owner to be able to afford their own housing, right? To stay in their own housing.
Mhm.
And are those things, does having both of those criteria, does that narrow the pool to a very small number? And is this just for like the pilot? Or is this, do you foresee that to be the qualifications later?
Those are good questions. I saw you nodding, Joe. Did you want to add anything there?
It's just that's generally my concern. It's just like the more strings you attach to something, the harder it is to implement.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Let me make a note of that question. And then Amy, before we get into discussing that, are there aspects of this of applicant criteria that you have comment on or would like us to consider?
So my note on that particular thing was, let me just go down to my notes. You know, I've always been in support of having the ADU homeowner, the property homeowner also be income qualified. I don't think it's limiting because really my feeling is that if somebody wants to build an ADU and they have enough money, they'll just build it. But there's a percentage of people, including myself, who struggle to get that money together. They may not have enough equity in their home. So it becomes important that they would get a HELOC, you know, or a loan like that. And then they would show that they had a certain amount of cash in the bank. And then they would show what they intend to get for rents. And then that would be a good candidate. But if you don't qualify it, I don't think you run any risk of limiting it. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Are
So-
you, is there any block to just like saying something like that applicants will be selected in order of need or something like that?
No, and Joe, that actually opens up a good point in some of what I've been thinking about that also ties to what you were saying, Jeremy. So, you know, ultimately, I do think the issue of financing and need is in tension. And does bring up this question of how much of a unicorn are we looking for? So, you know, to speak to what you were saying, Jeremy, first, I would say that the idea that there's the ability to finance the whole of the ADU or renovation project could look like a lot of different things. So at the concept level, that's what I was wanting to be broad about, that rather than creating something where we're locked into all of the financing has to come from the Affordable Housing Trust, and therefore we have to come up with a program that's big enough for that we could have some openness for the maybe myriad of situations that people are in. And so maybe that looks like for one person, it looks like with the loan from the Affordable Housing Trust and their own labor, because they're a contractor or whatever, they don't have to pay for labor, and that covers the cost of the materials and the electrician or something. Or for somebody else, maybe they have a small nest egg that they want to invest in this, or somebody has access to some home equity, but not enough to fund the whole thing. So my intention there was to be broad. It may be useful for us to fine tune the language. That's my first thought. And then around the financial need issue, I was just talking with June at Construct, because she was recommended to me as somebody to talk to about thinking about access and accessibility. And she brought up that same kind of question around the unicorn, and her concern also was that if you make the threshold for financial need for the homeowner, landlord, applicant too high, you really just, you're narrowing the program so much that you won't have enough people seeing themselves possibly in it. And I do think, Joe, that you're right. You can solve that though by having your evaluation criteria of the applicants score financial impact for the homeowner landlord high. And so if you get an applicant that's really going to make a huge difference. And Amy, to your point, if you have an applicant that is within AMI, they might rank the highest automatically as a result. So that's what I would add to that discussion. Thoughts about what to do with that? What we might want to recommend? Do we want to adjust anything in this section? Oh, the other thing I wanted to bring up was, to the question of the language of ADU. We talked at the last Affordable Housing Trust meeting about that a good candidate for something like this could be an old duplex that somebody wanted to restore to being a duplex. Like they bought it, it was being used as a single family home and they wanted to restore it to being a duplex. Jeremy, that's classified differently than an ADU, right?
You're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
Sorry. Yes. So I mean, in Great Barrington, you can have 3-family by right? So like a 2-family plus an ADU. So the ADU part of that would be the size of it. So you could classify it as the ADU as long as it's not too big.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
I'm wondering if we want to think about the language of ADU. Like if that's an adjustment we want to make to be able to really catch what we're talking about. An additional dwelling, a rental, I don't know. I don't have an alternative, but it would also kind of speak to the tiny house language question that came up.
Yeah, I'm concerned to be too restrictive in who could apply, because we can't predict what kind of situations will exist. And to try and limit that in any way, I think is really not a direction we should go in. I think anybody who wants to do this and thinks they can get some income out of it, we should take a look at what they propose and make a decision on that. I don't think we're going to be flooded with 50 applicants. I mean, if we get 2 or 3, that'd be fantastic. And so I think we could give each one of them consideration, or just make it first come, first serve, and we'll consider it. If we think it's viable, okay. If we don't, goodbye. Try again later.
Jeremy?
No, sorry, did I have my hand up again?
Oh.
No. I don't have anything to add to that.
So Bill, are you saying you'd like to pull completely a demonstration, like anything related to the applicant's need?
As a requirement, yeah. I think we could, in the request for proposals, we could say preference would be given to people with, income at 100% or below AMI.
Yeah.
But
beyond
that,
I wouldn't set I wouldn't set an AMI threshold. That's why I think it does definitely need to be broader than that.
Yeah.
Joe, you were going to say something?
I think if we could say something like either like preference language, where it's like preference for applications will go to applicants for whom the ADU rental income will assist them in keeping their home. And the one about applicants must demonstrate, because I think we might want to also say like something like I guess it's a criterion, but it's like it's kind of a fuzzy, like it would tend to be a kind of, in some ways, a fuzzy criterion, because they'd be like, if you give me this money, then I can go to the bank and then they might give me the rest of the money. You know, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like if this, then that. So there, and then it could also be like, in other words, if someone says like I'm going to convert my garage into an ADU, and then you could just sort of say like, okay, so if we give you this money, like narratively tell us like how are you going to you know, like what contractor are you going to use, or like do you know contractors, something like that. And so we could have two criteria of like, one like a just an evaluation of like success of the project, like, you know, and then the other one would be need. So it'd be like, it's like those two things as like a holistic evaluation of whether to pick this candidate or that candidate, you know what I mean? Like their ability to actually do it and their need for it. Because you could have someone who really needs it, but if you give them the money, you're just saddling them with debt, you know, because or they won't be able to build it.
Yeah, I mean, what I would like to think about, and this I think will fit more, we'll have more space for an in-depth conversation, and is how do we like, we need to know that it's a project that can actually happen. That's
Mhm.
and that we don't, I mean, we have such a finite resource. It would, I think the worst result of the pilot would be if we financed one or more things that and money went out and they never were completed and they never provided housing. But
Well, we would probably work out like a construction loan. I mean, they do a certain part, they get some of the money.
yes, I think that's true. And then on the financial need part, I feel like I would like to adjust this language, but I also, you know, because I've talked to some people who are like, well, like, why not like have somebody who, for example, is somebody who's here part-time, maybe this is a second or third home, and they would like to build an ADU so that they can have a caretaker on the property. And I do feel really strongly that this is not that those are people who can get financing in another way. And that the big part of the point to me of this project is trying to put something within reach that isn't easily within reach, or is
Okay.
out
Yeah.
of reach for existing residents.
Yeah.
But if it is a sorting thing, then it's kind of an issue. I don't know. I mean, I guess you might. I mean, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could say something like, if you had like one candidate and they're just like the richest person in town, then you just like don't do the program. I think you could have that leeway.
Yeah,
But there's also this argument that like, I mean, because there's a view of like giving money to somebody who doesn't need it. But there is the fact that there's also this idea that $100,000 for affordable housing in the worst case scenario is still actually a good deal in this market, which is ridiculous, but that's true, you know. So like, but maybe that's not good politics, but that is truth, that $100,000 to get a new affordable unit is like what we are doing in this town. So so I don't know. I understand the concern, because I think everyone has that sort of gut feeling that would be unfair. But at the same time, if you have three candidates and one is needy and one is not, then you just go with the one that's needy.
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent we can address it in the scoring structure. I wouldn't like, to be really upfront, I wouldn't have proposed that. Like, the whole point to me of this is being able to leverage
Mhm.
funds to reach outside of the ADU limits because of the cost of living here, and in that way, and which doesn't mean that the applicant might not be within ADU also. So I'd like to think about how to allow for that to be broader than it is. And use the scoring system, but still hold true to that purpose. And similarly, I think it makes sense to try to fine tune the language around the financing to make that a little bit clearer. That it's not, we're not saying the applicant has to have the ability to finance the whole thing on their own, but that they have a plan for how to get to the full cost of the project.
Yeah.
So with those, like with the intention to make some edits there to get at those things, do we feel like we have the shape of what the criteria is to be an applicant?
With some changes on the language, yeah.
All right, so the task is to do language edit for those two items.
Do you want to put like in this, like, so the materials that eventually go out to the public, do you want the purpose to be like, this is what the program wants to do, you know? So basically what you were saying, but not just in the in what the candidate looks like, but just like an overall statement, like this is what the program, so that people that want to build that ADU for a caretaker just go like, well, that program's not for me.
Yes. I think so. Right, and I think that we could pull that from the proposal as is and edit that for clarity. So in the draft right now, it says the pilot ADU incentive program has a dual purpose to test viability of leveraging the Affordable Housing Trust to increase ADUs, adding affordable housing to the market while simultaneously contributing to securing housing for a population facing unsustainable housing costs in Great Barrington.
Mhm.
Test partnering with individuals to increase AMI protected housing in Great Barrington. So I think like that could be edited for clarity, but yeah. So state purpose, edit, language, and that's clarity on the finance part, and broadening the applicant need part.
Yes.
All right.
And, you know, making it clear that they don't have to have all the money they need to build it.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
All right. Can we move on to the tenant requirements?
So I just had one thing when we're talking about, when you guys are talking about like putting like Great Barrington funds towards housing. I mean, really, are we at that point where you're putting this amount of money towards units already, or are we not there yet? With the programs that you guys have done, I know, what is it, the Grove Street property, but I think isn't everything else really leveraged? Like even the down payment assistance program and the other things that you're doing, you're not talking about like this kind of money per unit, right?
no.
So, well, I was talking, so I'm basing that on, okay, so for example, what's it called? What's the building that construct or
The marble block.
marble block building? So it's like downtown building, they have existing rental, it went on the market, so we wanted to preserve the units. And then it was a development corp, CDC, they asked us, they said, hey, we want to move fast to buy this so that we can so we can make sure that they remain affordable.
Yeah.
And you give us $100,000, and for our $100,000, we will guarantee 1 unit stays affordable. So like,
Is that?
yeah,
Oh, I didn't realize that was the deal, but that's also affordable in perpetuity, right? That's not 10 years.
That's right. Yes.
yeah.
So
perfect.
it's a little, I mean, so it is a little different, but I mean, CDC is going to do a project where all the units aren't affordable.
Well, one, they're not doing that project anymore and we're getting the
Oh,
money.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're trying to move it right to a different, or is it
I
completely?
think it was, so it was structured that some of it was Affordable Housing Trust Fund and some of funding, and some of it was ARPA funding. And both the Affordable Housing Trust funding and the ARPA funding had to be restricted to AMI. The ARPA funding had to be restricted to 60% AMI, and
Wow.
had more, all ARPA funding had to be restricted to 60% AMI.
Wow.
And our funding had more leeway. So our restriction was higher. And so ours was only 1 unit of the total units restricted.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
but there was another conversation, and I didn't go through, but like Ian Rash was saying, give me 250,000 per unit.
Yeah, but that didn't
Go
go.
through.
That
I know
didn't go
I didn't
very
go-
far.
I know it didn't go through, but like it's not that unrealistic to say like between 100 and 200, that's where people are talking about deed restrictions
But
for like
but
near future.
yeah, I mean, that started a whole conversation, you know, of whether or not, I mean, that did start a whole another conversation. And,
Right.
you know, if Great Barrington wants to really build stuff, or is, you know, like right now where like the money's so leveraged
Mhm.
that, you know, like where do we want to be? And so,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think, you know, from the Affordable Housing Trust lens, I think we have a relatively small pot of money, and are like, we can, I think the way, and I don't know that we're all in agreement about this, but I think that like there's these larger scale projects that the CDC has been doing. I think that's kind of taken care of in town, that putting up new units. And then you kind of have the next rung down from that, which is like the Windflower, and in theory, the Marble Block is kind of like that, where it's not large scale. It's meets some, to me, somewhat emergent need. Like we're real, to me, I'm like, Marble Block to me was about, oh, we can lose 13 more relatively affordable units that exist, or we can be part of a larger project to secure that housing for the future. But I don't, you know, like we can't have much impact in those areas. And so I
Right.
think that where we can move more is like the kinds of things we've done so far with the Housatonic project and the Grove Street. And
well,
you know,
I mean,
this
I
could
mean,
be a medium, but it's not going to
Yeah.
solve the affordable housing crisis. It's never going to put enough units, right? Like that's
Right.
not what this is going to be.
I mean, the impact that you can have in that realm is if you, if somebody needs money and they can't go through the CPA process, like they don't have, that timeline doesn't work for them, like
Yeah.
that, because a lot of that CPA money is that initial money that they need to be able to leverage the rest, or that they can't get funding for the types of things that they're using it for.
Marble Block.
And so you guys could do that as well. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to just be CPC. And then in those circumstances, you're leveraging it to these big projects.
But I think like with the down payment program,
Mhm.
it's great conceptually, but where we're at is the market is, there's such a gap between where the market is and what what it takes to qualify for the program, that we are not able to move funds that way right now. So I think that on the individual level, where we're doing interventions at the individual sphere, my personal view is a way to influence access is to start putting some larger pots of money on the table. Maybe ultimately through the down payment program too, where you actually change access points. Because otherwise, like it's a very, very specific person who can buy here and a very specific person who can build here.
Yeah.
Did you want to add something, Bill?
No.
So shall we move to the tenant requirements?
Yeah. That's murder.
So our task is, if we can get to it, to make a recommendation on what AMI requirement we would attach to this program for the tenant, and identify options for administering those requirements. And either make the recommendation to the full trust board to for further discussion, or if we have a strong recommendation, just be like, here's what we recommend.
I think if we're actually going to try and help out the homeowner that's creating the ADU, we should, make it 100% or less, because that's got the best chance of actually having a few $100s extra every month. I can't imagine you could make any money if what you have to pay per month is not quite $1,000.
Yeah. Other subcommittee members?
I agree with that.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Bill. Yeah. I mean, it'd be nice to be able to pick out who you're trying to help, but then, then does it make it then can the homeowner not do it?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty tight.
Before you add more, Bill, I want to give Amy a chance to offer her thoughts for our consideration.
So I'd like to get some clarity from what Bill said, something about $100,000, because I had thought that he was in support of smaller, like $20,000 increments. Because if we go with $100,000, that's going to leave out the whole Maydew.
That's not what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about right now is what will the AMI requirement be for the tenant? Will it be 100% AMI?
Oh, 100%. Okay.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think 100% is 80 to 100 is a great range. Because the people doing this are going to want some return on their investment eventually. And I think if you make it too low, it's going to be a struggle.
Okay. All right. And then Bill, you were going to add for further discussion.
Well, I just, if you only want to help out the person that's going to live in the ADU, it doesn't really matter so much. But if you want to help out both ends of the equation, there's got to be more money coming in to benefit the homeowner.
Yeah, but I was in that fence area that you're describing, and I did look at, like, that's one thing that if we structure the loan as a 0% interest loan with the 50% forgiveness eligibility, can bring down the loan payments so that you can go with a lower AMI and still have income coming in. That said, what really made me settle on 100% was talking with Jane and June at Construct, and they both said, we need housing options that go up to 100%.
Yeah,
Because we have housing options coming on with restrictions below that.
right.
And they felt like that's really covered. And that it will, in the end, also help the homeowner landlord with just the process of having applicants for their space.
Yeah,
So I'm good with 100% if
Okay.
everybody go with that.
yes.
Great. So then the question of administering the tenant requirement had come up at our last full committee meeting. Here's my suggestion. Well, one Construct has said that they would be willing and able to do that. I don't, so that's an option. The other thing I think we can do to keep it simple is that the verification happens at the point of the application and lease signing.
Mhm.
And then after that, what you're verifying annually is that it's the same tenant.
Right.
And you only have to verify income again when you have a new tenant.
That's right. That makes sense.
So that's my proposal, if anybody would like to.
Yeah, no,
I make a motion.
I mean, you don't really want to throw somebody out if they start making a little too much
No.
money.
It's
No.
illegal, so.
Well, there's
Yeah.
that.
Do you,
Yes.
and so who's doing that then? Is it
Well-
still Construct doing that, or is it? So who's doing the verifying?
So Bill, how do we do that with the down payment program?
They can make as much money as they want after they buy the house. They only have to qualify at the closing.
No, but I mean, like, who does the verification, administers the verification?
The trust did. We asked them to submit 2 years of taxes.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if Construct's willing to do it, I think that it's better to not have it be in the hands of
And I'm fine with that.
the body. I think our job is best suited to saying, here are the parameters.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think, Chris Rembold had mentioned to me that the town is talking about, and Jeremy, you might know more about this, that the town is talking about adding staff capacity around housing.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's something that's we're talking about in the planning board. We had mentioned it in our joint meeting with the select board. But I think we're gonna pursue it and put something together. I mean, we're still at the beginning stages of it. It's probably gonna be, it may be a CPA or a CPA application. It's gonna be like a test, like a 1-year test of it, and to see how successful it is. So we would, I mean, I think we'll reach out to the trust to see what kinds of things, what kind of assistance that you guys would like. Yeah, and so something like this, I guess that could be part of it. Also, just like assistance for like an applicant. So an applicant reads this and it's like, wow, this sounds interesting. Where do I go from here? It could be that position that they would go to, and they would, kind of help them out to get them really started on it. Or,
Yeah. So, like, for the pilot phase, I don't think we'd have that.
Yeah.
But
no, because you want to do it quick.
then
Yeah.
I think it might make sense to look at that.
Yeah.
I think,
And
yeah, go ahead.
So another thing is like your whole note taking thing, like, so how we have like Chris we have Chris and Kim, right, at the planning board meetings. Like I would like when we're shooting this thing around, you could say like we need that person at our meetings, and I mean that could be like a real thing. So I mean Chris functions as like another planning board member, more or less, and you might want to have that kind of staff position that can provide a bunch of support for you.
Yeah. Bill, my question about the administration of the mortgage down payment program is that's structured as a 0% interest loan, right?
It is.
So how are
Oh,
payments
no.
made?
It's deferred payment, so there is no payment until you sell the house.
Gotcha.
That's in the deed.
Because that
We
was
have,
the other thing. I was like, if there's already a mechanism where payment is happening, then
Yeah. Exactly. We have a mortgage, we have a second mortgage on the house.
Yeah.
For the amount that we gave. We get that money back when the house is sold.
yeah. So that was my other thought was if, this is a program where somebody will need to be the homeowner landlord will be needing to make payments on their loan. And so that is also potentially a way that you do the verification is tied to that payment, but it would be much simpler if it's something that is staffed in some way. And so one way to do that is construct. So
I mean, I
good.
think if construct is offering, I'd be like, yeah, please.
Yeah,
well, it might be that they're willing to do it on the pilot, and then from there we have to figure it out. So it's worth further conversation, but I think it's one or the other. Like if construct can do it, great. If we need to tie it to the town, then I think we tie it to the mechanisms of the loan itself, like that there's a time of year.
Right.
With your payment, what is due is the verification documentation.
Yeah.
All right. So for next steps there, we are going to recommend 100% to and need to confirm with construct what they're willing to do. And we're going to recommend that that's verify income eligibility at the time of the lease, and then subsequent years that it's the same tenant, new lease, new verification.
Yeah.
Great.
And you could probably do a 2-year lease if you wanted to do that, and just check it every couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
I mean, just check that it's the same person.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once the initial lease is signed, then it's just confirming that it's the same.
Right.
But we're not doing, but you don't do an income verification if it's the same person.
Right.
Right. It's that you just need the one original income verification at the time of the lease. So moving on to the loan structure and administration. So what are our tasks? To review the concept phase outline and identify areas of agreement, areas for further deliberation, and areas for fine tuning. Identify any elements of the Barnstable model that we want to consider for incorporation, and any concerns that we have related to administration capacity. So let's do the same thing. We'll invite board members, committee members to weigh in, and then Amy, and then discussion.
Thought I had that, but I guess I don't.
So things that fall under this is the 10-year AMI restriction.
I did get some clarification on that from Chapa. I think I sent that to the group. That that would be okay. They prefer 15 years.
So for 10 years, they're not paying the loan. At the end,
No, they'd be paying this one. They'd be paying the loan. This is not the deferred payment.
They'd be, so this is how I would do it. I'd have it that for 10 years, they're paying on the 50% of the loan that is not forgivable.
Right.
Okay,
And the part that is the 50% that is forgivable as a grant gets forgiven at the 10 years and only really turns into a loan with payments if they haven't maintained the unit as an AMI rental for 10 years.
okay. So, and it's 0% interest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Seems fine to me. And why, so someone said that they like 15?
Well, the GAPA, whatever that is, the sort of a state housing authority. I can tell you what they are here. Hold on a minute. The Massachusetts Housing Partnership, who deals with all things housing and CPA requirements and things like that. For smaller amounts of money like this, a 10-year restriction is a local decision. Let's see. Typically a regulatory agreement and not a deed restriction. But it still has to be filed with the registry to outline the affordability requirements.
Does have to be filed with the registry?
That's what it says. They're not
So it's
deeded
a-
restrictions, but they are an agreement that gets filed at the registry of deeds.
Ah, that was my question. So it's
Yeah. Forgivable mortgage. Homeowner, that's right.
Jeremy or Joe, do you have anything for this section?
No, I mean, I'm just thinking about, I think 10 years is better if we can do 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like that is allowable, yes.
Jeremy, do you have anything to add to this section for discussion?
So I guess I just had a question for Bill. So if it's not a deed restriction, then how so like if there's a change in ownership of the property, like during this period, like does just it being filed, does that get the trust their money back, or what happens? Like I just don't know what the mechanism is.
I don't know either
So,
at this point.
but, I mean, in the concept proposal, the idea is that in the event of a property sale,
Yeah.
the
I understood that part,
Yeah.
but I was just,
We're
what's the
asking
mechanism
mechanism?
without the deed restriction?
Uh-huh. Interesting. Because the way you transfer it to the new property owner is the deed restriction.
Right.
Is that what you're saying, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's what I'm just wondering, is what Bill's talking about, is that another mechanism to do the same thing? Or does it not?
That's more
That
or
sounds like
less
a good
to do the
follow-up
same.
question.
Yeah, I think I'll have to get back to Shelley on that. She didn't, mention that here. I
Wait,
think it would be a nice thing to offer if we could say the new homeowner would be able to have that loan transferred if they wanted to continue operating it as a affordable dwelling unit.
All right, let's mark this for more. This is going to take more research to resolve.
Yeah.
Amy, did you have anything you wanted to weigh in on in this section about how the actual loan to the landlord / homeowner is structured?
Yeah,
You know, we're talking about such a little amount of money. I mean, basically, it's like a fancy car loan. So I really feel like 10 years is a long time. And I really feel like if you put a covenant on it that says that it must be kept affordable for 10 years, it's going to be a huge disincentive for anyone who wants to apply for this.
I think, yeah, I think that's the minimum that CPA would
Funds.
allow us to do. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's just, yeah, that there's just conditions.
So you
of-
can't do it any less than that?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
conditions of
I
how
don't
the
think so.
Affordable Housing Trust funding can be used.
If you try to do an incentive on affordable housing, then it has to be has to last for 10 years. Or
What
That's
Bill
sort
is
of-
saying is that they would prefer 15 was the minimum,
yeah.
okay,
but we could get away with 10.
for small things you can get away with 10. Okay, makes sense. I'm sorry, I got distracted because my kids ran in. Did we say that there would be an option to transfer the loan?
We said,
I'd like to see that.
yeah, we said that we need to do more research to understand what, how an agreement would work differently than a deed restriction, and if that's a mechanism for looking at transferring the AMI requirement and possibly making an option to transfer the loan.
Yeah, because if you think about it, you actually don't want to have a, like ideally, if someone sells their house and they have a low income tenant, you would ideally want them to keep the tenant. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you want to have the incentive. You want to make this like sort of, I don't know. You just like it'd
Well,
be nice for their
it-
to be transferred.
So this is true, to my
Yeah.
knowledge, and maybe somebody knows more about this, but if you have a unit or property that you use as a rental unit, and there's a lease agreement in place, and you sell it, the lease is still in place for the full term of the lease, even with the new owner.
But like, so if there's like, so if someone's selling their house and they say, I don't know, the numbers are weird, but basically if someone says like, listen, if you keep this person on hand, then there's like essentially they would make the money if it's built into the price of the sale. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
so it'd be like, you'd say like, I'm selling you the house for 100,000, but if you keep this tenant for 3 more years, then you'll actually, you can structure so that they would experience a profit, or they would get more. I don't know.
Well, you have, it's whether or not if the loan continues after the sale. So if you complete the loan, right, you know, or if, I don't know, if the trust gets involved again and you let the new potential owner like continue the loan,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. I mean,
Wouldn't it be cleaner though, Bill, for the, like, to keep the loan part separate? And the reason I'm thinking that right now is that the originating landlord homeowner, they get the loan from us. They want to sell. The cleanest thing to do is for at the time of sale, they just pay back the loan. It's done.
Yeah.
Let's say the new owner is like, no, but this would really help me. Why wouldn't they just apply for down payment assistance? Like,
'Cause maybe, but I'm saying like, I'm saying, what if the new, so you could have somebody who has a regular tenant who's low income, and even if they're like on 2-year leases, whatever, and so like, let's say like at year 5, they're on this 2-year lease, the homeowner sells to another owner, and that owner can then in 2 years get a new tenant. So now you're out 3 years, that if there was an incentive for the new owner, regardless of their income, to keep the loan, then you would get 3 more years of rental.
Right, but I think the question Jeremy opened is, would if the AMI restriction isn't a deed restriction, if it's this agreement that gets filed with the Registry of Deeds, does it still function? Like, would it still carry over? And if the answer to that is yes, then we have the simplest solution, that unit is restricted for 10 years, period.
Oh, that's
If it
interesting.
doesn't
Yeah, if
carry
that's
over,
true, that's
then
perfect.
we need to start thinking about like, what
Yeah.
can we do about that?
And I think we would be allowed to do a deed restriction.
Hmm.
We're gonna essentially be giving them a mortgage.
Can you
Yeah.
do a deed restriction for like, well, I guess you answered that earlier, that a deed restriction is not required to be 30 years.
Right.
Yeah, if you can attach the unit, then that's great. But then you don't have to worry about it.
So let's, so on
And
the top,
Then
yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Bill, I just had a question about the 10-year thing. Was that a CHAPA thing? Did they say that's a minimum for CPA funds? Or did
CPA
they,
funds,
it's just a preference?
it's a preference. CPA funds are supposed to be used for permanently affordable housing.
When it's acquisition though, but for these
Right.
kinds of things, it doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, they like to see a 15-year sort of restriction on it, but 10 years seems to be okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to go under 10 years, but but that's, on the other hand, I want to offset that restriction with a 50%
Yeah,
of the
I think
loan
that's good.
forgiveness program.
Yeah.
And kind of cap things that way.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah.
so the only question with the forgiveness thing that I have is, so because if it's a forgiveness, if after 10 years, the homeowner had rented that unit at whatever, I guess, at or below 100% of AMI. And so if in the verification of the tenant's eligibility, let's say it was that one tenant for the entire 10 years, and then you only had verified their income at the onset. Do you think that in terms of selling this program, not to the homeowners, but selling this program to the town, that gets you in a little funny place?
Well, my response is twofold. The first part of my response is like, you can't kick people out of housing because their income changed.
Yeah.
So like a landlord can't do that. So to try to set up something else, like, I mean, it would be structured around the lease renewal, and I don't think it's very viable or ethical. And then to the larger question of like, what do I want the community to know about this, or why I think this is worth our community investing in, even if somebody ends up outside of AMI over the course of those 10 years, my answer is really like, we want people who can't afford housing to have housing. And if somebody who can't afford housing finds housing and then gets to stay there and be part of our community for 10 years, even after they get a promotion, that's a success story. That's my answer, is that's success. Yeah. And I think I'd said at the last meeting, I also think that, we have such a flexible economy at this end of the income spectrum, right? Like where a lot of people are making, a lot of people are in hospitality and restaurant work and various outdoor work, and incomes can vary so much year to year, and what is on a tax form can vary year to year. And I think that I think being able to bend with people is actually a way to like be true to who is in our community. And that, yeah, so maybe in 10 years, somebody is in a different place. Great. That somebody wanted to keep them on their property for 10 years and they succeeded. Great.
Yeah.
That's my answer to folks. And I'm happy, like, to the community at large, if anybody wants to talk to me about that, I'm happy to talk about why I think that, but.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I'm just like,
A valid question.
is,
Joe
is,
asked.
well, are the town voters with you? That's my only question about that. And then in terms of like how to do it, how does the CDC with their income, income qualified housing, like how do they kick people out, or is it?
I didn't run it by CDC, but I did run it by Construct, and I think it's worth asking in more detail, but in the broad strokes conversation I was having, I was hearing affirmation that yes, that's the way you need to think about it.
No, okay. Well, that's cool. Okay.
I've heard that before too.
And I do know that they're thinking this through for the Windflower, where they expect there'll be more turnover.
Mhm.
So what about the Bill, you brought up before, structuring this like a construction loan? Looking at the Barnstable information, it looks like they pretty much do cost reimbursement.
Right. That's essentially what you would do with a construction loan, more or less. A certain part of the thing gets done, you pay them. Another plumbing gets done, you pay them. You essentially pay the contractors as they go along.
Yeah. So if this was a construction loan through a bank, there'd be inspections
Oh, yeah.
along with that. So
Yeah.
that's some of the administrative parts of this that I think need some brain power on our part. And it might be that we just need to, the next step here is really asking Chris to join us and talk through
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
town perspective.
And of course, the building inspector has to check it, they have to do the plumbing, they have to do the electric. All of that stuff has to get checked off periodically.
Yeah.
And at that point, you give them more money.
So Amy's had her hand up. Also, I need to get out of here at 8. Do we need to build in time for citizen speak?
We
Yeah.
do. Why don't we wrap up? Yeah, why don't we wrap up this section? And because I don't think that there's another section that we'll do in like 5 minutes, unless somebody disagrees with me.
No, I just wanted to mention that I think the tiny house on wheels thing, where all you need to do is put in water and sewer and electric hookups, has a lot more potential than trying to build anything at this point. Because somebody else is already paying for the little house on wheels. You slide it in. You're talking a difference of $150,000 to $200,000 probably between actually building something and just doing the hookups and a little pad.
Are you saying that you don't want to do this program?
No, I just think we should sort of make sure that people know that's an option.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's a much more profitable option.
You could have 5, you could have 5 people apply for that.
Yeah.
And all of the money could go to that. We don't know. It depends
I'd be
on.
okay with that.
You could
Yeah.
have somebody apply. You could have somebody apply who's living in an old duplex and wants to restore it to a duplex, and it's gonna be a $50,000 project, and we could
Exactly.
still do 2 ADUs, like, I mean, 2 tiny houses, right? Like, this is the part that I think ties to what you said last time, that's about, the pilot involves telling a really good story and having good marketing so that people are
Mhm.
talking to each other about it. That's where the applicants are gonna come from. The
Mhm.
conversations people have with each other that say,
Mhm.
hey, I was thinking about this. I don't think I'm gonna do this, but I could see you doing it. Like, the
Mhm.
more people who can see themselves in it, even if in the end they decide not to, the better it will be for what the applicant pool looks like.
Yeah,
So let me just recap on the loan structure administration part. I heard that the committee members are good with the AMI, the 10-year AMI restriction. We need more information about the how an agreement differs from a deed restriction. And Bill's gonna follow up on that.
Mhm.
And we need to have further conversation, ideally with Chris Rembold, about if we structure it as a construction loan, what's the burden of administering that? Can inspections be tied, like, can phases be tied to building inspections, et cetera? And it sounded like there was some, Jeremy, you brought up something about the forgiveness part, and I don't know if we fully captured what you were thinking.
No, I think, I think you did.
Okay. All right, Amy, you had something you wanted to add?
So when we were talking about tenant requirements and administration, we talked about when the house gets sold, what do you do? I feel like maybe we might want to consider that that grant be kept as an incentive, and maybe we apportion that out. So that, like, if the house were to sell, I don't know what the terms of getting that 50% granted, but maybe, it comes to term at 10 years. So then it would behoove whoever's buying the house to keep someone in there, because they would get that benefit, not the person who's currently owning it. That person who's currently owning it would get whatever they get for 100% of AMI, and they would be able to build it in the first place. The last thing that I wanted to add to recap for everything up to this point, before we do the public speaking, is I really feel like it should be stated when we talk about what tiny houses are in the application criteria, that is different from ADUs. It's not implicit in my estimation. I've already gotten into a conversation with somebody on Facebook about it. And I had this problem when I tried to build an ADU and I talked to Chris Rembold about it years ago in Great Barrington. A lot of stuff that people who write language think is implicit and understood is not. So it really needs to be sort of in the language of, a fifth grader. Make it clear. The last thing I want to add is we wouldn't have to worry about any administration if we just gifted this money. And honestly, you guys get this money as a gift every year. So if you wanted to just give money away, $20,000, to 5 applicants, it would seriously streamline this process. But I do want to say how pleased I am to hear that Jane and June want to take this on, at least for the pilot. That's awesome. So that's it.
To the first part of what you brought up, Amy, I think that's similar, like, it's a different version of what Joe was also asking about, like, can you use the loan as an incentive? And I think where we landed on that is that we may not need to even look at those incentives. It depends on the answers Bill's going to get around the difference between a deed restriction and a an agreement-based restriction. So we'll need to have more discussion once we have more information. So we should be returning to that. The only other thing I had to add to this was, in situations where the total cost of the project exceeds the portion we're funding, and the proposal includes whatever other sources of funding, I think that we should have built in a structure and how we're paying out the loan that it's like up to X% comes from us up front. Then the next phase of construction needs to be completed with the other resources, and then we'll do the final phase.
Yeah.
So just put that on the table. All right. Let's close this part out, and I guess first I need to ask subcommittee speak time. Anybody on the subcommittee have anything to add at this point?
No.
I've spoken.
Great. Citizen speak time.
I don't see any hands raised.
All right. Going once.
Is there
Yeah, I'm going to allow people to talk and then we can see.
okay.
Okay.
Now, citizen speak.
Citizen speak time. That means you can speak if you are not on the subcommittee. All
So
right.
they may not know they're not muted. I mean, that they are muted.
Hang on.
Or
I
maybe
can't,
you
I
muted
can't,
them.
I can't unmute them from here.
So if you're somebody
ask
who
them.
would like to speak and has been listening to this, you can unmute yourself at this point and state your name and address.
Or maybe not.
I think we might be-
Nobody wants to talk.
So if they are wanting to speak and they are not able to for some reason, what should they do? If it's a technical issue.
If it's a
Well-
technical issue,
Talking is permitted for both of our guests.
Oh, you got it. You show that it's okay.
Yeah,
That's what it says.
they just unmute. So.
Yeah. So I think we're okay. And then for the full affordable housing trust meeting is on Tuesday night next week. Is that correct?
Yeah.
There'll be citizen speak time there as well. You can check the website for the agenda. I expect that what we'll need like at least another subcommittee meeting to hash out the rest of this. And I suggest that we schedule that over email with some input from Chris Rembold. Does
Yeah,
that work?
be good to have him join us.
All
Yes.
right.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Do I have a motion to adjourn
So moved.
and a second
Seconded.
by unanimous consent?
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Bye all.
You left.